Hi everyone, it's James here from the Champions of Happy. Thank you so much for everyone's love and likes on the birthday post. We are officially 1 year old now. Thank you so much to Ben and Mikey from Once Upon a Scream for being my guests on the previous episode to celebrate. I had a great time. Moving on to this week's episode, I am joined by Scott. Scott I knew from the London Gamers Chorus. He used to live in London and then he made the big leap of leaving his job, his life, his friends, everyone he knew to travel to a place he'd never been to before in Italy, bought a home, and has made an entirely new life for himself, and is slowly, in his own way, trying to make an impact on LGBTQ plus life out there, be it with travel, tourism, just blogging, podcasting. It's a really interesting story because I think it's something a lot of people wish they could do. I think Scott realizes he's in a very lucky position to do this, but it's very inspiring, and it's like, I think what we adored like a stress-free life, and he's still a very busy man, and he's still got a lot going on, but to drop everything, make that massive leap, go to a country you don't know, especially when it's a language you don't know as well, it's interesting, and I really wanted to get this down onto a podcast so we could really dig into his journey. So here we are with the next episode with Scott. Enjoy. Also, if you are enjoying, very quickly, go to iTunes podcast, the Apple Podcast app, and give us a 5-star rating and a nice comment. That way the podcast can continue to grow and we'll get more and more people listening and more involved in conversation. We're also on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook, but honestly, Instagram is where it's really all at. Thanks so much and enjoy the episode. Hello and welcome to the podcast, Scott. Hello.
Hi, James. It's a pleasure to be here with you on Champions of Happiness.
Thank you.
Happy.
How happy? Yes. So you, Scott, are currently in Italy. Whereabouts in Italy are you?
I am in Puglia, which is the heel of the boot of Italy, just outside a city called Ostuni, for those who may know Puglia. But if you don't know Puglia, it is very easy to find because, as I say, it is the sexy heel of the boot of Italy.
Nice. I did have to quickly look it up on a map before we started.
Okay.
Like, actually, I have
Don't
no
worry.
idea where that is. And I also thank you for pronouncing it Puglia. Am I saying it right now?
Puglia.
Puglia.
Puglia,
Good.
yeah.
Wasn't entirely sure how to pronounce it. So we'll do a very brief introduction as to who you are before we dive properly in. So you're Scott.
Sure.
I know you from London when you used to sing in the London Gamers Chorus, like I did.
That's right. Indeed, I did many, many years ago.
It feels like forever ago now. And then you were a big time hotshot lawyer man in the big city. And then one day,
don't remind me. It's a lifetime ago, and it really is a lifetime ago. It feels such a long time ago, a different life. But yes, I was. I was a lawyer in the city in London.
And then one day you just decided to drop it all and just escape to Italy, and then live your dream life.
That one day was Brexit. The Brexit vote happened, and
I
remember walking. Yes, I remember walking to work in the morning and crying because I thought, "Oh my goodness, this just doesn't feel like the place I want to live anymore." And it was Brexit that made me decide that I would pack up and leave the UK and move somewhere that allowed me still to enjoy the rest of Europe.
Oh, I had no idea it was because of Brexit. But had that been on the cards, was the idea of moving somewhere on the cards anyway, or?
Not really. I had always thought that at the end of my working life, it might be nice to retire somewhere abroad or have the option of living abroad. And although retirement was still many, many years away when Brexit happened, and it did make me think that maybe now is the time to do it. Maybe if I wait another 15 years, it will be much harder to move somewhere in Europe. And maybe the time is now.
You are an olive farmer. You're a chorus founder. You've got your own website, got your own podcast. You're a very busy man.
Just for fun, olive farmer, I would say, James, just for fun. We live in an olive grove, so we have to do something with our olive trees. We have over 40 olive trees, and in a good year, we produce about 350 liters of olive oil, but it's not a commercial thing. We do it just for fun. We give our olive oil away to friends and to family, and sometimes I use it to fundraise for the choir, which, as you mentioned, I set up. It was one of the things I thought that I should do after I lived here for a few months, because I realized that life for LGBT people here in Italy is still pretty tough, and especially here down in the south, away from the big city lights of Milan and Rome. And having had the experience of the choir in London, having had the experience of my management and diversity role at the law firm I worked for, I thought maybe with these few skills that I have, I should still do something. So one of them was to set up a choir, Puglia's first LGBT inclusive choir, which I did.
Amazing. So we're going to dive into all of that.
Okay.
But before we do, I want to start the podcast with a relatively new segment called Happy Moments. So this part of the podcast is where I ask my guests to share a story or a fact or a memory which just is just full of happiness and positive vibes to put out to the listeners. So Scott, can we please have your happy moment?
Well, in truth, I think my happiest moment was when I had my civil partnership about 14 or 15 years ago. I did think about what my happy moment was, given that I've had this huge change of life and I'm much happier now than I ever was before. But I do think that I have to go back to 14 or 15 years ago to when I had my civil partnership. And I think that was a truly, truly happy moment.
So you've been together 14 years, is that right?
Oh, 2006. I think it was we met and had our civil partnership in 2007, which was at a time that we couldn't have marriage. It was civil partnership, which I thought was the only thing. But of course, as soon as we could convert it into marriage, we did convert it into marriage, which I think we did around about 2016, I think it was 2016, 17 that we were able to do that.
Where did you have the partnership, the civil partnership?
Islington Town Hall.
Oh. Was it a big affair? Was there a wedding dress?
There were just the two of us, and then our two witnesses, because there's a long story behind it, which was that we had planned to have celebrate our civil partnership around about the time of my 40th birthday, which was a big bash in Paris. So the idea was that we would have our civil partnership and then we would celebrate it by announcing to our friends at my 40th birthday that we had had our civil partnership. But because of the timings and because Christoph, my husband, was away working in China at the time, we missed the cutoff point for the registration of, you've got to give 14 days clear notice or something like that. We missed the cutoff point by 1 day. So we had to wait until he came back from China to book that. Anyway, it just meant that we couldn't have it in time for my birthday. And having invited my friends over to Paris for my 40th birthday, I didn't then want 3 months later to invite them all down to London for our civil partnership. But I didn't want to say to them, oh, we're having our civil partnership. You are invited, but you don't have to come, because that sounds like you don't really want them to come. So we decided we would not tell anyone about it and we would just do it. And we only told and asked our two witnesses to come and be there, which we did. And it was great because it meant there was no pressure. We didn't have to worry about how anyone else felt about the day, whether anyone else was having a happy time. It really meant that we just did it for ourselves. And James, that was the best thing about it, that we just did it for ourselves and had a much nicer day for it.
Oh, sweet. So your partner's from France. How did you guys meet?
Yes. We met on a dating app. The official story is that we met.
We met at a bar.
The official story is that we met on the the Eurostar, and a trip somewhere between London and Paris. But the real story is we met on a dating app.
Got you. Okay, well, there's no shame in that.
We met on a dating app. We met on the Thursday. We had our first date on the Thursday. We went to the theatre on Saturday night, and Christoph came home with me on the Saturday night. On the Sunday, he was leaving to go to Moscow to work. And I said to him on the Sunday night, when you come back from Moscow 10 days later, why don't you move in? And so he did. And that was it.
Wow.
So within the space of a date and a second date, I then asked Christoph to move in.
So you're pretty confident then that he was all right.
Yeah, well, I'd had 2 long-term relationships where I guess that I grew into myself and grew to know myself in terms of what I was looking for myself, how I was as a person, and it probably made me a better person for it. So I did have a fair idea of what would work and what wouldn't work. So yeah, and here we are all these years later.
Thank you for sharing your happy moment with it. That was lovely and sweet.
No problem.
So I want to explore your journey from the start to the end, because I've been doing my research on you. I've been reading blogs, been reading posts, been reading your website, your Instagram, and I think I have a general good idea as to the flow of it. But for our listeners to understand your amazing journey, you're a hotshot lawyer. You're in the big city. You're in smoky town. It's not what it used to be, and you moved to Italy. This is a move I imagine a lot of people wish they could do. Just like drop the day job, go to a European place, and live the dream. Was it a tricky transition to get over there? Like, did you know where you wanted to go? How did you find the place? How did you know where the right spot was going to be for you guys? Yep, explore. Tell us the beginning.
No, we didn't know where we wanted to go. It wasn't planned. We had heard of Puglia, but never had visited it. I had never once expected or thought that I would end up living in Italy. It was not on the cards. It was easy for me because I really did not enjoy my job. When you were mentioning there, James, that I was a city lawyer, I can still feel the stress and the stressful sweat come on. And I'm not sweating because of the heat here. And I should say it's 36 degrees where we were an hour ahead of you. So it's coming up for 11 a.m. Our time, but it's 36 degrees here in the shade. But it wasn't the heat that was making me sweat. It was the stress of thinking about my job in London. I didn't enjoy my job. I hadn't enjoyed my job for years. It was completely stressful. I had no life to myself. Anytime that I thought I was going to get a moment to myself, it ended up having to be rescheduled or cancelled. One of the last years I ended up working there, I was working on a project. And it just took the rest of the energy and the rest of my life out of me. It wasn't that I was just working, here and there. I was working 16, 18 hours a day, day after day. I was going home late at night. I was getting up. I wasn't sleeping because I was so stressed by this transaction. I would wake up in the middle of the night thinking, oh, I've got to do this. Oh, I haven't done that. Oh, what about this? And I actually did become ill at one point with this. I ended up having a seizure because I was so stressed by the whole thing. And I just thought, you know what, this is crazy. This is no life. This is no fun. And it's not worth anything. I had to respond 24/7, that kind of thing. So it was crazy. And it just, that year really, really made me think. And that was the year before Brexit happened. And then when the vote came and I was, as I say, walking to work that morning, I thought, you know what, this is just the perfect time and the perfect opportunity for me to leave this behind and just change my life and move on. So for me, mentally, it wasn't difficult to come back to your question. Mentally, I was there. It was a really easy move for me to make. For Christoph, it wasn't. Christoph loved living in London. He didn't want to leave London, but he supported me. So after about 3 weeks of talking, I was much more flexible about where we went. Christophe, as you say, is French, but he didn't want to move back to France. It's the last place he would have gone. I would have gone to France, but he didn't want to. So we talked about the places that might suit us both. And Italy, we decided, was a place that would suit us both. And Italy worked for Christophe also partly because his grandparents on his father's side were Italian. So actually, Christophe is fluent in Italian as well. So
super
Italy
helpful then.
Made sense. Yeah, I spoke no Italian, but Christoph was fluent. So that Italy did make sense in that respect. The first opportunity we had to come to Italy, we visited Puglia and we just fell in love. We loved Puglia as soon as we got here just because of the weather, the beaches, the climate, the food, the people. So we came to scope it out with my one golden rule, which was, whatever we do on this holiday, it's just to find out whether Puglia would work for us. And it's not to buy a house. But needless to say, I came home with the holiday souvenir that, everybody wants to have, which was a house in Italy.
That's insane.
So that was done. And then it was just kind of tying up all the loose ends in London and moving from London to Italy, which we did. So we came to Italy and we came to Puglia in October and we left London the following March. So October, November, December, January, February, March. So 5 months. So the Brexit vote, I think, was June. We came to visit Italy in October and we left London by the end of March.
That's such a quick turnaround. How long have you been there for now?
So it's over 4 years. So it was 4 years in March this year that we arrived. So it will be 5 years next year. It's surrounded by little small towns, all of which are very, very pretty. The biggest main city that people would probably have heard of is Ostuni, but otherwise we're not far from. So I'm about 15 minutes from Ostuni. About 45 minutes from Lecce, which is one of the large cities, and the capital of Salento, which is the lower part of Puglia, and I'm about an hour away from Bari, which is the regional capital of Puglia.
So you make this move you know no one there. You don't really know the area other than this lovely holiday you've had. When you get there, were there any moments and you're moving in and you're like, oh my God, what have I done? Where are
No,
we?
James, no. You know what? Because I would never allow myself to think that. I'm the kind of person that never, if I make a decision, I will never look backward, and I won't allow myself to think about looking backward and whether I might regret it, because there's no point in doing that. That gets you nowhere. So even if I did, or I might have been inclined to feel that way, I'd already made the decision that I would never think about it. But in all honesty, no, I didn't. When I moved here, first of all, there were a few things that I missed. I really missed the London Gay Men's Chorus. I've been singing member for about 15 years, and I really missed singing with the choir and the guys of the chorus, and just everything that it meant to be a member of the London Gay Men's Chorus. And I suppose to a lesser extent, although it wasn't quite as important then, because the food here is amazing and continues to be amazing, and I love Italian food. But the one thing that Italy does not do very well culturally is it does not integrate foreign cuisine well. They usually always have pizza as well, because a lot of Italian people, even when they go to a restaurant with foreign cuisine, will still want to eat something that has a semblance of Italian. So they have pizzas as well as their own cuisine. And the dishes that they have tend not to be very, far in the direction of authentic cuisine. So the spicy dishes are not very spicy at all. And they tend to be very ordinary and run-of-the-mill. So not that fantastic. Although there are certain exceptions. We found a fantastic Japanese restaurant in Lecce, which is great. So that was the other thing that I missed, although not immediately. It was other cuisines, Chinese food, Asian food, Thai food, Turkish food. Oh my goodness, we lived in Green Lanes, and where there's Turkish, and a fantastic Turkish restaurant just about in every corner. And I miss that. But you manage, you get by. And although I'm become very adaptable at cooking and turning some dishes into foreign dishes, the one thing that's extremely difficult, almost impossible to find here, is coriander leaf. And without the coriander leaf, I really can't make an authentic Mexican dish. So that's the one thing that still defeats me.
You're in Italy. You've settled into the house. Was it quite lonely? Was it quite lonely when you first got there? How did you first integrate into the place you were?
The thing that I found the hardest was not being able to communicate. So irrespective of whether that was socially with people or just going to the shops or going to the deli to buy food, I couldn't communicate. And what I hadn't bargained for was how difficult and frustrating it would be not even being able to go to the deli counter and order some cheese or order some cured meats, because a lot of people, the first thing is, it is my golden rule not to have to rely on English, because I think that there's nothing more rude than somebody who lives in another country and expects everyone else to speak their native language for them, i.e. there's no way I would expect Italian people to speak to me in English. So because I spoke no Italian when I got here, I found that really, really difficult and really frustrating, and it used to make me quite angry. And I, just angry with myself, and I hadn't bargained on how difficult it would be not being able to communicate. But of course, I studied, not as much as I should have done, but I did some studying. And once I could say just a few things, that really, really boosted my confidence. And I kind of reverted to my old confident self, where even if I got it wrong, I would still go and I would try and I would manage. When I came here, I actually joined a local choir, because there's a community centre in the little town near where we live. And they do amazing things. They actually have an organization called the World Music Academy, which has the Pizzica School, which is Pizzica music and dancing. They also had a choir which sang regional music in dialect. So I went there and I made a lot of friends. Even though I couldn't speak very well, they were very, very welcoming to me. And again, it's thanks to music. It's thanks to the fact that I had this background of coming from a choir, having sung with the London Gay Men's Chorus for 15 years, that I could slot right in. And even though I couldn't communicate, I could still sing with this choir of people. And they were very, very friendly to me.
On the language front, when you were learning and using it with the public and people, did you find people appreciated the effort? Or did they just say, no, we can just talk English, it's fine?
Well, the young people and my friends from Barry who I did the choir with, they preferred to speak in English because they wanted to improve their English. So that was a big problem that I had. I wanted to improve my Italian, but they wanted to improve their English. So they preferred to speak in English, which was much, much easier for me. And despite my best intentions, I always lapsed into speaking into English anyway. And whenever I wanted to have a sustained conversation or a conversation on a more complex level or a more involved conversation, I would have to revert to English anyway, because I couldn't have a deep conversation, and I still can't have a deep conversation in Italian, although now I understand better than I can speak.
Can you give me a little bit of Italian now?
Oh, yeah, I can, but well, first of all, can I tell you a funny story that that highlights the problems that I still have with my language? So we have I can never remember if it's a chiropractor or what's the other person that kind of manipulates. He's not a massage therapist, but he's a cross between a chiropractor, or the chiropractor cracks your bones. But this is somebody that manipulates your muscles. I can't remember what they're called. Sure. So it's like a chiropractor. What's he called? Anyway, once a month I go and see the chiropractor. I want to say he's not an orthopedic. He's a ortho something. Anyway, we go and see let's just call him the chiropractor. He gives you the kind of massage, but it's more than a massage because it's manipulation. And, I had a problem with my shoulder, which, just evaporated away. I have problems with it's just old age, James, but I have problems with my neck creaking and stuff like that. So going to him once a month is amazing. And, it's a lovely, lovely experience. So one day I wanted to tell him that my shoulders were aching. So the word for shoulders are spalle. Okay, spalle. However, there's another word which is palle. So spalle, palle, and palle actually means balls.
Oh.
So instead of telling him that my shoulders were aching, because I was like, the one mistake that I must not make is this mistake. And I was so worked up about making this mistake, bearing in mind he's quite an attractive guy. Instead of telling him that my shoulders were aching, I told him that my balls were aching.
And his response was, drop your trousers?
Well, I think he realized, of course, it was a language problem. So mi fa male le mie spalle instead of mi fa male le mie palle. No, that's the right. I said mi fa male le mie balle instead of mi fa palle instead of mi fa male mi fa whatever spalle. So anyway, I think he kind of giggled and he didn't giggle because he's he's not the giggling type. But anyway, he knew that I didn't mean that my balls were aching and I needed him to do something about it. He knew that my shoulders were, I fortunately indicated to my shoulders as well. Oggi ci sono il sole, abbiamo la piscina e posso vedere I miei due gatti. Today the sun is shining. I can see my swimming pool and my two cats. I can see two of my cats running around.
Yeah.
So that's just a little bit, but yeah, I'm proud that I can speak a bit more than I did when I came, but it's still not, it's still very slow. I can understand better than I can speak. So, but I get by, and that's the important thing.
So you part of a local choir, you leave eventually to make your own choir in Barry. What choir? What were they called? Tell us all about that.
Riccitoni. So this was Riccitoni. So I knew that when we came to Italy, because I had taken part in one of the international choral festivals with the London Gay Men's Chorus in Dublin, and I met an Italian choir there from Bologna called Comos, who were Bologna, Italy's first gay choir. So I knew that there were gay choirs. There was a gay choir or some gay choirs in Italy when I moved here. So after thinking about maybe, I could use some of my skills, and maybe one of the things I should do is start a gay choir, just to maybe because it might make a difference for some Italians and because it's such a lovely thing. I thought, well, how do I go about it? Because I know nobody. And I thought, well, I do know people. I know the guys from Bologna. So I contacted the guys from Bologna and said, do you know anyone who is in Puglia who might be interested in starting a gay choir here? And they put me in touch with various people. Some people were musical directors of other choirs in Italy who knew people. So I had 4 or 5 names, and I contacted one person who was in Barry who wanted to start a choir. And after meeting a few times and after being invited to go to a meeting of the organization for the Italian LGBT choirs, which was called Chromatica, So it was the organization for I Cori Arcobaleni, for the Rainbow Choirs of Italy. We went there and we met with them all, and they were very enthusiastic and very supportive of our project. So we decided that, yes, Michele and I, the guy that they put me in touch with from Bari, we decided, driving back from Perugia, which is about 600 kilometers away, we decided that, yes, we would go for it. And we started talking about names for the choir. So because the choir was going to be from Bari, we thought, I thought, baritone. And I thought baritone is quite fun because, it sounds like baritone. And I think it does mean baritone, the baritone voice. And because we're from Bari, it's baritone, the baritones. The baritones, the tones from Bari.
Very smart.
So we thought that was great. And then we asked some of the girls about it. And because Italian has gender, and baritoni, Tony with an I, is the masculine form of Tony, of tone, of tone. They said, well, actually, it's a bit too masculine. It's not very inclusive because it's a masculine word. So we kind of went back to the drawing board. And then Michele came up with this idea, which was riccitoni. And riccitoni literally means rich tones. So we still have the same problem with toni. It's masculine. However, the joy about riccitoni was that it was actually a play in words of an insult, of a word that is used, of a derogatory term for gays here in Italian. Riccioni. Riccioni means like queer or faggot.
Got you.
So it's an insult. So a riccioni, faggot. But we thought, if we take back this word and change it slightly, we take like a weapon, we take a bomb, and we turn it into something beautiful like a flower. Michele, who I started the choir with, is a poet. So he wrote all this stuff about taking this word riccioni and changing it to riccitoni. So it became the rich tones. And we took this weapon and we anti-weaponed it and made it into something beautiful like a flower or a rose. So riccitoni meant rich tones, but it was also playing the word for fag. And one of the things that made me laugh, I'll never forget, that we were singing in Bari on World AIDS Day about 3-4 years ago. And we were singing on the steps of a church. And even with my limited understanding of Italian, we were holding these signs that said riccitoni, and some youths came by, teenagers, late teenagers came by, and they were laughing, and they were like, and I heard them saying, "Oh, do you think they realize that their name sounds like fags?" And that was the whole point. But they weren't. I don't think they understood. I don't think they looked at us and they saw us, but I don't think they realized that we were an LGBT choir, and that's why we had chosen the name Riccitoni. And they just thought it was funny because it sounded like Riccioni, which of course was the whole point. So I sang with them for 2 years, and they did reasonably well. But then we had the lockdown, and Bari is at 110 kilometers from where I live. So when we had the lockdown, I realized that, I didn't miss the 110 kilometer trip there and 110 kilometer trip back, i.e. a 220 kilometer round trip twice a week for rehearsals. And then, more often if we were doing a performance. And I thought, it's an awful long distance. Now it's an awful long distance, and it's an awful long time to get there. So I decided after the first of Italy's lockdowns that actually that was probably the time for them to take the destiny of the choir into their own hands, because it was always intended as a project for Italians, not to be shaped about my thinking of what an LGBT choir should be based on my experience, because my experience is a different experience from theirs. Our societies are different, just the way that we organize things, the way that we adapt to situations, and the fights that we're fighting. There are common themes, but theirs was from a completely different angle. And so I just felt that was the time to leave it for them to shape the destiny of that choir.
With the chorus, your choir, was it easy or difficult to find people to join, or was there quite a was it?
No, it wasn't so difficult.
People were quite keen.
I mean, yeah.
How do you find people?
There is a strange contradiction here, in that far fewer people feel that they're able to be their authentic selves here, without a doubt. I do find that it's slightly generational as well, but also, generational in the sense of a much younger generation. So what I find is that people who tend to be around about 27 upwards, 27, 35, who may be gay, but don't like to identify as gay, really aren't able to live their authentic lives. And they, I know people who I believe are only interested in having sex with people of the same sex, but they won't identify as being gay because it's still difficult for them to identify as being gay because of society and various other pressures. However, if you come down to the 18, 19, 20-year-olds, in my experience, they seem to be much more accepting and much easier about it, which is thoroughly encouraging. I was speaking to somebody, I was speaking to him about, how it was for him. I think he's 23. I think he's just finished studying or was finishing university. And I asked him how he identified, and he said he was gay. And I said, how was it? Was it difficult coming out to his parents? And he came out when he was 16 years old. And I said, how did your parents react? And he said that his mother sent him to a therapist. And I was like, oh my gosh, I hope, Ricardo, that wasn't because she wanted you to, she thought that this was just a phase you were going through. And he said, no, not at all. You know what? She sent me to a therapist because she wanted me to have no shame. She didn't want me to have any of that. And I was like, wow. And I said, Ricardo, it was not the answer I was expecting to hear, James.
No.
And when he told me this, I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe how supportive, that is a complete surprise that I'm hearing this, because it's the last thing I would have expected. And it's extremely progressive of your mother to have been thinking like that there was no question that it was about getting you to change your mind or to decide that, you weren't gay, or to get it therapized, if that's the word, to get it out of you. It was just to make sure that you felt comfortable about yourself and didn't feel any shame about yourself. And I do sense that there's a difference, at that level of age. So the young 20-year-olds and the top half 20-year-olds, there's a very different way of thinking about it. And I know from my own experience that the people 27 plus, they're still unable to live their authentic lives. But a lot of that, there are societal and economic pressures here. I mean, things here are so very different. So one of my friends, 29 years old, and he still lives with his mother. He and his older brother and his younger brother. So there are three boys. I think his older brother is 35, his younger brother 27. The three of them still stay at home with their mother. They struggle to find jobs. Without jobs, they can't afford homes. They stay at home until they're much later. I mean, hardly any of the people that I know, the young people I know, have full-time jobs here, James. They just, there aren't the jobs for them. And that is a really surprising and eye-opening thing. A lot of them do seasonal work, but it is very seasonal. And the consequences of that, I find, are that they tend to be a lot less mature than, people that I would come across in London, for example, because, guys your age, when you're in London, and younger than you, you're much more independent. You're accustomed to looking after yourself, to being responsible for your own budget, to being responsible for your accommodation, renting a home, renting an apartment, renting a room, whatever. But here, 27, 28, 29, 30, they're still living at home. Their mothers are still doing their washing, they're still doing their cooking. It was always strange that my 29-year-old friend said, oh, I have to be home because I have to be home for dinner, or no, I can't stay out tonight and party because, I've got to be home because, for whatever reason, but because his mother would expect him to be home, that kind of thing. So there is that element to it as well, that it's because they can't live a truly independent life and they're still staying at home and tied to home. Sometimes that accounts for why they're also that they find it that little bit harder to be their authentic selves.
So at what point did the blog and the podcast come along, and can you expand a bit more on those for us?
So this was my second project. So I thought, I'll have a project for Italians that I might be able to use my diversity and inclusion management skills. So that was the choir was for Italians. And I thought another project would be, for people coming to Italy or a place like Puglia, where it's very easy to come here as a gay tourist and think, wow, it's a fantastic life. They're fantastic beaches. The beaches are full of hot guys. The lifestyle is great, without knowing that actually society, although Puglia is a much more liberal place than a lot of Italy, but still it's harder to be openly gay here. And also we have a government that are not very gay friendly. We have far right extremist parties that are very anti-gay, they're very anti-immigrant. And at the moment we're actually going through the process where the lower house has passed legislation, anti-discrimination legislation, where homophobia would be a hate crime. Other things as well, anti-disability hate crime. So it wasn't just homophobia, but it was giving us much more equal rights. And that went through the first level of the parliament here, and it was up for debate in the Senate. And the far right have, they blocked it. There have been so many arguments about it. It's taken over social media, and it's become a real obsession. And one of the unfortunate consequences I found about that is that because this kind of anti-gay vibe has become such an obsession, such a focus of political discourse by those who are focused on being against it, the far right extreme parties that are against it, that it's actually kind of legitimized homophobic. It's legitimized homophobic attacks, whether they're verbal or physical. So that's all by way of background of experience. So I thought it might be useful to have this podcast, which might just start talking about how it actually is being LGBT in Puglia, so that if you're coming here on holiday and you want to know about the fantastic beaches to go to, or the great restaurants to go and eat at, or the destinations that you want to go and see, that we can just talk a little bit about LGBT life, and maybe give some people food for thought that it may look on the face of it as ideal and a beautiful place to come, but there are still people struggling here on a daily basis in the LGBT community. So that was the idea behind that. And we started doing the podcast. And to publicize the podcast, we started doing an Instagram. And when I was doing the Instagram, I would post pictures of food or of fantastic scenery, and they would get 5 likes or 10 likes, not very much engagement or activity. But when I went to beaches and started taking pictures of my friends on the beaches, the 5 likes would become 500 likes.
Strange that, isn't it? How that happens when people just like attractive people on Instagram.
Yeah. And so then that would encourage me for more engagement and for building up more of a following on the Instagram account, which is Gay Puglia Podcast, by the way. I thought, well, we'll take more pictures of guys on the beach in their Speedos, all with permission. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, I'll ask one of my friends to model for me, which I did to great success. And the 500 became 5,000 likes and stuff like that. So then the Instagram, which was always meant to be, I say it like I'm in, Gay Puglia Podcast, the big gay podcast from Puglia, champions of inclusivity and diversity. And I realized that it wasn't inclusive at all, because all it was doing was catering to the gay male. Because it was hot guys in Speedos, which was doing really well. So that went down one direction. So I started on Twitter, which I've become a lot more focused on, because Twitter allows me to be a little bit more inclusive. And I talk about recipes, I talk about food, I talk about great scenery. And from time to time, I'll still slip in pictures of Lewis and his Speedos or whatever on the Twitter. But all that was then done to publicize the podcast. And to supplement the podcast, we started an online guide, which is gaypugliapodcast.com. And that's what took over. So suddenly I became this portal that was writing about Puglia as a gay holiday destination. And I would write guides for all the cities. I'd write about all the best beaches, and the emails would come in saying, oh, I'm coming for 2 weeks. Where should I base myself? Do I need to hire a car? Which restaurant should I go and eat in? Which are the best beaches to go to? Which is the best club to go to? So it really, really took off. And about a couple of summers ago, I found that I was spending all of my time writing and responding to these people that were answering me all these questions. And then suddenly I thought, remember that life that I used to have as a lawyer, where I would give counsel and advice to clients? Well, secretly, there must have been something that I quite enjoyed and liked about it, because now I'm giving counsel and advice to all these people who want to come to Puglia on holiday and telling them where the best places to go are. So I actually found that, in a way, I was kind of substituting my old life for what I was doing now, but of course in a much more fun and pleasant way. And I was doing it for myself because it's a non-commercial site. It's just for fun. And I've loved that. I've loved that, I've now become, because I've now been picked up by, there was an article about the podcast, about the website in one of the Italian national newspapers last year, because we ran a Best of Gay Puglia survey where we asked people who had visited to tell us what their favorite destination was, their favorite beach was, their favorite food was, etc., etc. And that was reasonably successful. And so it was covered in the national press. And then I was featured in a rather glossy lifestyle magazine about the podcast and the blog. And what I spoke about to them, it was all about the benefit of LGBT tourism to Puglia as a region, and especially post-COVID, where tourism is such an important part of the economy of our region, and it's taken a real battering, as it has in many other places and destinations around the world. Puglia as well is perfectly positioned because Puglia does have a reputation as being one of Europe's top gay destinations, both in terms of how gay influencers, gay travel influencers think about Puglia, and also in terms of the domestic market, because there was another survey done recently, not my own survey, but done by an Italian gay travel blog, where Italy's LGBT community voted for the best summer destinations in Italy, and they voted Puglia the best region. They voted Gallipoli, which is probably the gayest, where the focus of gay summer life is in Puglia, as the best destination. And we had the top gay beach in Italy here in Puglia, and we also had the 5th best gay beach in Italy. So we had 2 of the top beaches, including the best one, the best destination, and we were voted the best region. So Puglia really has this reputation for being a top gay destination, certainly Italy's top gay destination for Italians, but also as a European destination. So it's kind of grown from that, and it's become, it's completely changed my life. And although people don't recognize me, because I do keep myself out of the
I was going to
Instagram.
say, we never see you. We need to see
Well,
you.
you see me 2 or 3 times a year. I usually make an appearance around about Christmas or New Year to give a Christmas message or a New Year message to all our followers. And I think I did post a picture of myself with Lewis, who has become known as the guy in the white Speedos.
You need your own little photo shoot on the beach.
Yeah. I
Drink
think.
in hand.
Yeah.
If you could go back in time and talk to your former London-based self, who was going through the harder, more stressful times at work, what would you tell yourself?
Okay, well, I've never thought about this, James. So I think I would tell myself, my honest reaction, I would tell myself, it's not worth it. All the stress is not worth it. So, even if somebody might expect me to say, you know what, it's worth it so that then you can have the life that I now have, I wouldn't say that. I would just say the stress that you are living now is not worth whatever it is. It would just focus on the stress. I think I would have to say, look at reevaluating your life. What I now know is that I'm far less materialistic now than I used to be, because I worked hard, but I was paid very well, and so there was really nothing that I couldn't afford to do when I was living in London. I don't work now. I'm retired, but I'm not old. Excuse me, I'm not old enough to be retired. So actually, I'm not drawing a pension. So I don't have I don't have the same disposable income that I used to have, because everything is planned and budgeted. And so I think that I would also say that being so materialistic as I was when I lived in London isn't so important. And it's not, and I'm not nearly as materialistic, and I'm a lot happier for it as well. I'm a lot happier that I don't think that I need to get the best Samsung TV or whatever. Things have to be. I've become so good at repairing things, or doing makeovers and things so that they last longer. Food doesn't go to waste. And just things that are good, things that feel more wholesome. So things that before I would have just thrown away and bought a new one, I have to eke out their life to make them last longer. I have to repair things when I can. And so, I've taught myself so many more skills about repairing things, about the plumbing systems here, so I don't have to pay for somebody to come and repair things, although it's not hugely expensive, and it's good for the local economy. But I've learned, I've just completely reinvented myself, not just in terms of the work that I did versus the, in inverted commas, work that I do now, but also in terms of my attitude to life, my attitude towards being materialistic. And the other thing that I have to mention, and those of the guys who listen to this podcast that we both know, who remember, I have to say, you know what, James, I drink a lot less than I did. And this is something else that I realized about London life, that I had such a stressful job that without a doubt, I would come home late at night and I'd open a bottle of wine. And that was a stress management tool, drinking a bottle of wine. But it wasn't just that. It was also that a lot of the socializing that was done at work revolved around alcohol. So over summer, we'd be having barbecues on the roof terrace in that office 3 nights a week over summer. And you'd be, you go up there at 8:30, you'd start drinking, your wine glass would be topped up all the time. And you come 10:30, 11, you just, you wouldn't have been paying attention to what you're drinking. You would have just drunk too much. So that might be something else, James. I go back and say about, just look at what you're drinking, and really, is it worth it? And how much better you feel without it. Now, I have a relatively stress-free life. I can really look back and see the difference there, and see the things that weren't quite right at that time, even though I may not have known that they weren't right at that time.
To ask the polar opposite question, where do you see yourself in the next 5 to 10 years? What do you see yourself doing? Are you still in Puglia? What's changed? What's the end goal?
I don't see anything changing. I mean, this is the end goal, and it has to be in terms of my financial and economic position now, because we don't work, and I'm not going to go and get a job somewhere else. I'm still a number of years away from collecting my pension, so I don't see anything else happening, because I don't see how it could happen, but I don't see the need for anything else to happen, because I'm perfectly content here. I love my life here. I love living in the countryside. I'm not bored living here. There's still enough to keep me busy with the website and everything else that goes around the Big Gay Podcast from Puglia. And one of the things that might change, one of the things that I might like to do at some point in the future, because so many people say to me, well, shouldn't you monetize it? Shouldn't you make it into something that could be a bit more commercial? Is that, maybe if I have time, and it would be if I have time, because actually it's incredible how, even though I don't work, how much of my time is taken up doing what I do already. But maybe to do something a little bit more tourism, maybe to organize some gay tours, gay travel.
Well, Scott, we are coming to the end of the podcast now. Would you kindly share all your social media platforms?
Oh, yes. So on Instagram, it is Gay Puglia Podcast, all one word. On Twitter, it's Gay Puglia, and the website is gaypugliapodcast.com.
Thank you so much. You've made me want a holiday so bad.
James, I've told you that you're very welcome to come and visit.
Well, the moment the airports and airplanes and Amber
and
all that,
but James,
go away.
I love it because I love showing people around. Now that I do this, I love taking people and showing them around. So you would be very, very welcome.
Thank you very much. Your story is,
James, you're very welcome.
Really inspiring. You've done something I think a lot of people in the world aspire to do. So it's really interesting to hear your journey, and especially the influence and impact you're having on the LGBTQI plus community out there. So it's been a pleasure to hear all about it, and I hope your Italian continues to improve. It sounds like it's
anch'io, spero anch'io, James, spero anch'io. That means me too. I hope so.
See, is that Italian? No, that's not Italian.
Perfect. See,
it is Italian.
Yeah,
see, yeah.
It's yes.
See, how do you say goodbye in Italian?
So you can say ci vediamo, which is like we'll see you later. You can say ciao, of course, ciao, which is like bye, or salve, which is more formal. But I would say for you, I would say ciao a tutti. Right. It's like bye. Ciao a tutti. Ciao a tutti.
Ciao.
Ciao.